Good evening, kids. The Doctor's Wife. It's quite the deceptive title, isn't it? Similar to The Doctor's Daughter, who is actually the Doctor's wife, the story in question today would see audiences' speculation surrounding River's relationship with the Doctor get thrown to the wall.
What do we say to
River Song's backstory?
Not today.
A first-time viewer might be confused somewhat by this episode, but confusion is apparently the aim of the game, with Moffat running the show. Thankfully, this episode's fantastical qualities and mind-bendingly good script writing from Neil Gaiman would see this episode stand the test of time. Honestly, I'm probably the least informed person on the planet about the writer, as I've never read any of his books or comics. I do, however, love the Stardust movie, and hopefully, if this episode lives up to the hype, it will inspire me to give some of his penned works a try. I may have mentioned this before, but this episode was originally set to be aired for Series 5's episode 11 slot. Due to budget constraints, we have The Lodger instead. This resulted in the script for The Doctor's Wife being revised several times to fit with production and character changes. In its final form, we open on a strange initiation ceremony for a woman named Idris, played by Saran Jones. Having one's mind drained from their body is certainly a morbid way to open an episode, complemented by the surreal performances of Elizabeth Barrington and Adrian Schiller as Auntie and Uncle. Meanwhile, in the TARDIS, the companions needlessly reminded us of the traumatic events from episode 1 before the Doctor got a message from another Time Lord. Him saying,
"I've got mail,"
appears to be the sole inspiration for the Series 11 episode Kablam. The uncontainable excitement the Doctor expressed at the prospect of reuniting with another Time Lord matched my own. Intriguingly, the Ouroboros scene on the box symbolises the Time Lord's unique ability to change from life to death to life again in a cyclical nature. This box led the TARDIS to fly outside of the universe itself, further than they've ever gone before. Now, where have I heard that line before? Either way, with such a crazy prospect looming with the accompanied transfer of the TARDIS matrix into a human body, this really did get me hyped up for the adventure in just under 4 minutes. With the crew arriving on a distant planet, the Doctor makes it clear that they're in a form of bubble universe, curiously referred to in the previous episode. It might have cleared up the confusion somewhat had these two episodes been swapped in terms of episode order. Wait, no, they did fiddle around with the episode order to prevent the second half from being too dark.
No! Too dark! No! It's too bright!
We are then thrown straight into the insanity of this episode, with Idris behaving hysterically and erratically towards the Doctor. The pair are meeting for the first time, but also technically aren't, and honestly the TARDIS merely trying to grasp the idea of language was fascinating to me. The quick cuts and startling nature of this scene immediately puts the audience on guard. It rewards the attention of longtime fans with Idris's insistence on being stolen by a thief. Saran Jones just did such an excellent job throughout the episode performance-wise. It was like watching somebody being brought out of an insane asylum to see their long-forgotten family. The most applause-worthy aspect of this characterization, however, was the fact that our recurring characters had to deal with a person who could perceive in 4 dimensions instead of 3. This enabled her to be used as a foreshadowing tool.
The little boxes will make you angry.
House repairs you when you break. Yes, I know.
It means the smell of dust after rain.
What does?
Petrichor.
Crimson.
Crimson.
11. Delight.
Like
Petrichor.
Whilst being disguised as a raving lunatic. Auntie and Uncle then described the celestial objects they are on as having sentience, a character simply titled House. I was reminded of that Fallout New Vegas faction I never gave the time to play through, but I can say with certainty that both faceless entities spooked me to the core. This was probably enabled by Michael Sheen's surprising casting as the voice of House. Funny that I mentioned Frost Nixon in the review before last. God, you wouldn't guess it's him, would would you? We were also formally introduced to Nephew here, a green-eyed Ood who doesn't speak. When enabled, he produces the audible cries of Time Lords from within. Unfortunately, Nephew here is another example of a budgetary constraint, as Gaiman had originally envisaged a monster of his own to be a part of this story, and in the end, the BBC just resorted to the old costume cupboard. I don't think this was the worst idea, however, seeing as Nephew is used initially as a vessel for House's voice. After all the introductions and Idris put into a cell, it was great to see Amy question the Doctor's blind faith in the idea that there were actually Time Lords here. The Doctor seeking forgiveness for the most heinous crime imaginable sounds like a great trajectory for this incarnation should the Time Lords ever wind up being on the show again. This scene showed the brewing of a great Doctor Who story though when they separated the Doctor and companions. It was great how the Doctor did his typical protecting his companions in the TARDIS thing, except this time he may have inadvertently doomed them. It's at this moment they played these really strange eerie sound effects that may or may not be part of the score. It sounds like off-tune hollow wind chimes that may have become part of the furniture for these rubbish dwellers, giving the setting such a chilling atmosphere. There was also this fantastic reveal with the Doctor discovering this stash of distress beacons. It always seems to work in a Who story's favour whenever the Doctor gets these glimmers of hope that he isn't the only Time Lord left and just gets an emotional bombshell with that hope smashed on the ground. In fact, it was nice to see this incarnation display some weakness for once. I think I read somewhere that this episode was envisioned when Tennant was still the Doctor, which is unsurprising really, seeing how its quality stands out so starkly amongst its contemporaries, accompanied by the reveal that Auntie and Uncle are, as the Doctor says,
Patchwork people.
I was just astounded by the level of intelligent evil at play from the antagonist in this story. Time Lord bodies used to create marionettes for House's entertainment? That's so dark. How the mighty have fallen. And Smith's performance, well.
You gave me hope and then you took it away. That's enough to make anyone dangerous. God knows what it will do to me.
It's great to see him justifiably pissed off for once too. He's normally so irritatingly carefree that it makes my blood boil. We then reached the scene where those who weren't quite paying attention understood that Idris is the TARDIS trapped in a woman's body. The premise of asking, what if the Doctor and the TARDIS could talk to each other, flourished here as the two radiant performers truly gave it their all. It established a fresh connection between the two most fundamental elements of the show that to me was totally unexplored territory.
Then you stole me, and I stole you.
I borrowed you.
Borrowing implies the eventual intention to return the thing that was taken. What makes you think I would ever give you back?
My god, it's just amazing to think this entity has known the Doctor longer than any companion he has ever had, and yet not a single word had been exchanged until this point. She probably knows more about him than he does about her.
My TARDIS.
My Doctor?
Their fundamental connection to one another both in story and in a meta-narrative sense is highlighted to such a degree that it makes you wonder why such a brilliant idea had never been tested out before. The sound effects of the TARDIS coming out of her mouth look a bit tacky, but the point is hilariously made that despite the TARDIS having a title and a model number, she doesn't even have a name. The closest thing resembling such a thing is, of course,
Sexy.
And the music in this scene, my god, that wind chime piece I was babbling on about earlier, you can hear it throughout until the Doctor lets Idris out and this beautiful waltz started playing as the pair sized each other up. What a scene! Ah! The energetic pacing of the episode doesn't let up, however, as the Doctor suddenly remembered his companions were locked inside his box.
So, Amy, Rory, why shouldn't I just kill you now?
The answer to the question got a formidable response from Rory.
Because killing us quickly wouldn't be any fun. And you need fun, don't you? That's what Auntie and Uncle were for, wasn't it? Someone to make suffer. I had a PE teacher just like you.
Which was applause-worthy considering how attentive to the situation he's being and not just moaning and asking stupid questions the whole time. Plus this new hostage situation where the pair have essentially replaced Auntie and Uncle as they are concurrently disposed of is just genius. For some reason, the Doctor's sonic screwdriver turned back to blue blue temporarily before we got a rather jaunty looking establishing shot of the TARDIS junkyard. I say jaunty because the pair are so motionless as the camera pulls away and there's not even any lip movement when they talk.
And you don't care that it's impossible.
It's not impossible as long as we're alive.
They might have gotten away with this when people were still watching fuzzy 4x3 idiots' lanterns, but now with widescreen HD you can see the cracks more visibly. Thankfully, the script saved the day as Idris put this view into perspective.
I'm thinking all of my sisters are dead, that they were devoured, and that we are looking at their corpses.
Perspective definitely being the key in this episode, given how little attention we've truly paid to the TARDIS as a character in the show thus far. They kinda dabble in it from time to time, probably most significantly in the episode Boomtown, which I'll be reviewing exclusively for patrons real soon if I can get enough pledges. 6 years on from the show's reboot, we finally got to see some of the rooms beyond the control center in the TARDIS. Lol jokes. Once again, we run into the budget issue as a scene with the TARDIS swimming pool was planned and was sadly cut. Incidentally, the Doctor does jettison the swimming pool at the start of the episode in order to get out of the known universe, so they did nod to it at least, but let me put it to you this way. Want to see the world's biggest walk-in wardrobe again? Want to see a bedroom or two? Or what about a boring old corridor instead? Truly though, I can settle with it, considering this is all House toying with and manipulating the pair against each other. The script compensated for the lacking set design though, as Rory was consistently stuck behind closed doors with more time going by every time Amy found him. Sadly, the pair didn't really take many measures to prevent such a separation from happening again though. They could have just held hands, but nope, Amy just insisted on running ahead of him after the first bout of waiting. This does actually make her witnessing him age at this extraordinary rate feel almost deserved though. Him being constantly left behind in the series added to this notion and makes for some heartbreaking and terrifying moments. I loved the subtle lighting changes that took place as well, making the corridors green, sometimes dim, all creating an atmosphere of disorientation. They also used it rather effectively later on when Amy went temporarily blind. Finally, those shots of Rory's rotten corpse and the blood-stained writing on the walls, Jesus Christ, how the hell did that get past the executives? This was downright horrifying, and I loved it! Meanwhile, Blue Peter struck again as the Doctor and Idris built a makeshift TARDIS designed by a child. This aspect is hardly important though, because what is important is how the pair started arguing, living up to the episode's namesake. They discuss firstly that the front doors are meant to be pulled and not pushed.
There's a sign on my front door. You have been walking past it for 700 years. What does it say?
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
I push.
Every single time, 700 years, police box doors open out the way.
When in actuality, the sign refers to the telephone inside the door and not the doors themselves. This brilliant conversation led to the Doctor finally getting to the crux of the matter about the TARDIS's consistent unreliability.
So you have never been very reliable.
And you have?
You didn't always take me where I wanted to go.
No, but I always took you where you needed to go.
This beautiful moment was unfortunately stopped dead by the painful reminder that she's not going to be talking beyond this episode, with her human body progressively shutting down. It adds this cruelty of nature aspect to an already short-lived situation. It's no wonder the dialogue never stops for a second in this episode, enforcing this idea that time is running out. Suddenly, Amy and Rory were directed to the old control room, and God did I beam with joy. They even brought back the old creaking ship's atmospheric sound effects. In case you couldn't tell, I couldn't quite contain my nostalgia here. Gaiman was originally after a classic control room, but we've already touched on the money subject, so moving swiftly on, all the characters were reunited and the Doctor then negotiated with House. How they both feigned sincerity was another testament to how worthy this antagonist was for this story.
Allow me and my friends, Amy and Rory, to congratulate you on being an absolutely worthy opponent.
Congratulations!
Fuck me, this is just so Oh, I love this writing. The characters then spectacularly made their way back into the main control room. I had a little trouble believing this idea of a failsafe being built into the TARDIS in the event that people were inside a room as it was about to be deleted. It didn't affect my immersion much, however, this certainly did.
Doctor, she stopped breathing.
It's clear as day that she bloody well is. The TARDIS was then restored, and the send-off for Idris was just tip-top emotional. To think the word on the tip of her tongue was alive. It's such an insignificant word to us humans that have to deal with the concept on a daily basis, and yet there are equally so many connotations surrounding the word. The TARDIS's and our own mortality was thrown into question here. It reminded me of that line in Parting of the Ways.
Let the TARDIS die.
There's so much about the life of the TARDIS that we honestly don't know anything about. Even the TARDIS saying hello was exactly what needed to be said. 700 years and they hadn't been able to communicate, and now the prospect of time going on with them not communicating ever again was on the horizon. That factor alone truly justified all the tears exchanged between the two. Admittedly, I wasn't quite a blubbering mess, but I was so impressed that Smith was firstly given the opportunity to show some emotion like this, but also that he pulled it off so brilliantly. Remembering that this character can be lonely without companions, somebody to talk to might be the fundamental solution to his needs. Of course, we can't really have that though, can we? Doctor Who coming to a satisfying conclusion? Yeah. In your dreams, mate. The epilogue scene displayed that characters can in fact hear each other above and below deck.
How's it going under there?
Yeah, just putting a firewall around the Matrix.
There was also a bit of teasing for future episodes as well. Even Rory had to remind us once again of his occupation.
I'm a nurse.
But I did like imagining Amy and Rory's bedroom being nothing but bunk beds, tying up with this line from earlier.
You're like a 9-year-old trying to rebuild a motorbike in his bedroom.
Christ, even the question of the Doctor actually going to sleep gets thrown in here too. What on God's earth would his bedroom look like? I'm kinda imagining it looking like Howl's bedroom in Howl's Moving Castle, full of trinkets, odds and ends, that sort of thing. Just absolutely full of sentimental crap he's collected over the centuries that he can't seem to let go of. And of course, that lovely ending reminds us that the TARDIS is still alive and kicking, and that we might as well enjoy the adventure while it lasts. So, did it suck? I am really choking on my own words today, aren't I? Honestly, I'm doubtful an episode will live up to that one in the show ever again. God damn, this episode blew me away. Predominantly thanks to the performances from Smith and Jones and the fantastic script that is exploding with unique ideas and keeps you hooked throughout. The character of Idris herself is something to behold, and it was great that our main character was challenged by such a simple yet effective antagonist. The general atmosphere of this episode is weird, eerie, and brimming with fun. Rory was actually utilised in this episode in a way that wasn't intrusive or annoying. Aside from the usual teasy, series-long stuff and a few budgetary considerations, they did an outstanding job with what they had. I give The Doctor's Wife a 9 out of 10. Oh God, does it feel good to say that. The Doctor seeking forgiveness for the most heinous crime imaginable sounds like such a great trajectory. The Doctor seeking forgiveness for the most heinous crime imaginable sounds like such a great trajectory for this incarnation. Yeah, fuck. I think I read somewhere that this episode was originally envisioned. I think I read somewhere that this episode was originally envisioned when Tennant was still the Doctor, which is unsurprising really, seeing how its quality stands out so starkly amongst its contemporaries. My mouth is just not working today.